Hello friends, Matt here with Donec Requiescat. Today we're going to talk about the discovery of the soul. Now, I have to give a little apology at the beginning. I'm not claiming that science has just recently found the soul, but we've known about the soul since at least Aristotle. Some of the recent attempts in science have been to try to locate the soul or explain it away. For example, Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion says, "Human thoughts and emotions emerge from exceedingly complex interconnections of physical entities within the brain." Now, this is an interesting statement. Emerge. He says that they emerge. Now, it's a spatial term, right? Coming out of something, going into something else. Where exactly are they emerging into? It would seem that those physical interactions are emerging into something else, right? What is that thing that they're emerging into but the person? And so it's lacking a little bit of scientific exactness about where it is that these thoughts and emotions are emerging into. Another book I read recently, 7 Brief Lessons in Physics by Carlo Rovelli, and he says this: "If something in us could infringe the laws of nature, we would have discovered it by now. There is nothing in us in violation of natural behavior of things." So the first question that comes up, having been trained in science and physics, I would ask, what experiment would we do to see that? Where is he expecting to see this violation of the laws of nature in us? But secondly, there's an important distinction to make here. There's a common understanding of the soul where there is a split between the soul and the body. And the soul somehow exists by itself and the body exists by itself, and the two sort of interact with each other. That's an idea of the soul that goes back to Plato, and then it was resurrected in the so-called Renaissance Enlightenment period by Descartes. But this split between the body and soul really has a lot of problems, and it's not the common idea of the soul that existed in Aristotle and throughout the Middle Ages. Instead, the idea of the soul is that it is the very essence of the human being. For example, this chair is a chair because it has material and it has the essence of a chair. Right? It wouldn't be what it is unless it had the essence of the chair, but that essence is not itself a material thing. Right? If it were just made of material, then it would just be the material of the chair, and then it wouldn't be differentiable from anything else that's made of that same material. Right? The essence of the chair is by its very nature an immaterial thing. And so everything has an essence, so everything has an immaterial component that is the essence, that is what makes the thing what it is. For human beings, our essence is what we call our soul. Right? But the human soul is necessarily different from all the other essences around for a few reasons. One, Roger Penrose in his book, The Emperor's New Mind, argues, even from the point of view of mathematics, that what human beings do is essentially different from mere computers. He argues from Gödel's theorem and from the Church-Turing theorem that because we've been able to develop mathematics and do the types of things that we do as human beings, the human being is more than a mere computer. He sums it up by saying, "The quality of understanding is not something that can ever be encapsulated in a set of rules." And that's all that computers do, is they just follow a certain set of rules. And so there's some immaterial component to the way that we think. Aristotle and Aquinas go through a number of arguments demonstrating that the way that we think, this quality of understanding, even from a philosophical perspective, cannot be merely material. There is some immaterial component to the way that we think. For example, if you hold in your mind the idea of an elephant, that idea is not itself a physical thing. If you're picturing an elephant in your mind, it's not because there is actually an elephant in your mind. Even if it was there, it wouldn't be a real elephant. It would be a little model of an elephant, and therefore not an elephant. And so it wouldn't have anything necessarily to do with actual elephants. But the fact is that idea of elephant applies to any number of elephants. And so since it is something that's separate from those elephants and yet applies to and links all of them, it's an immaterial thing. Even more to the point, we can think about things that are immaterial in nature, things like numbers. You've never seen the number 3, right? You've seen symbols for the number 3, but the number 3 itself is not a visible thing. It's not a concrete thing. And yet, you can think about it and understand it and perform mathematical operations with it. And that's true for all mathematical entities, including perfect circles, perfect squares. You've only abstracted that from your observations. But you have to have an abstract component to you if you are able to do abstraction. Again, the effect cannot be greater than the cause, and so you can't have an abstract concept being supported by a purely material, non-abstract thing. Walker Percy is a novelist from the 20th century, and he was originally trained as a doctor. And then he continued his career as a novelist and was a convert to Catholicism later in life. And one of the things that had an impact on him, and he wrote some philosophical papers on this idea of semiotics, the way in which human beings use language. In particular, he was talking about this idea of names, that we can give a name to something. So instead of thinking about the idea of an elephant, we can think about the name elephant. And we can use that name to apply to any number of things. And he uses the example also of Helen Keller, because she had this ability to name things that came to her a little bit later in life. And this idea that the word water could be linked to the liquid water itself, right? And we can change the names. The particular name doesn't matter, but the fact is that we have this ability to give a name and the thing itself this link, that this means this other thing. Percy says to give something a name at first sight, the most commonplace of events, is in reality a most mysterious act, one which is quite unprecedented in animal behavior and imponderable in its consequences. So the fact that Helen Keller was able to link the word water with the liquid itself, that is a real link. Those two things are really linked together, but it's an immaterial link, right? There's not some string linking the word to the thing. Even we have different ways of expressing the word. We can write it or we can speak it, just as sounds that come from somebody's mouth and into somebody else's ear. Percy says, a material substance cannot name or assert a proposition. He's implying that by the very fact that we are able to give names to things, this semiotic process that we have, then there must be some immaterial nature to us. He says the metaphysical implications of semiotic are clear enough. Knowing is not a causal sequence, but an immaterial union. In other words, it's not matter acting on matter in this causal sequence, but it's an immaterial union between the thing and the word. And that tells us then that our essence has this immaterial nature to it, this intellectual nature, and that's the human soul. And we've known about it for quite a while. So yes, we have discovered the human soul, but the discovery was made a couple of thousand years ago. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share with your friends.